Alright, folks, it's time for a bit of a serious one, or at least one that's more serious, considering what I do over here on Hobby Nightmares and on the Northern Exile channel. But I thought, in terms of recent events, it's time for me to address something that I've been putting off for a little while now, and that's discussing whether, in Warhammer 40,000, we have a toxic fan base. I'll come right out and say it right at the start, just so you know. Like we do with most video essays of this type, we always, if you're going to write an essay, you always make sure that you give your conclusion first, and then you explain it, and then you reinforce it at the end, right? So my conclusion is that no, we do not have a toxic fanbase. So if you're here to have your views on why Warhammer 40,000 is toxic and the people inside of it are toxic, or you want me to sit here lambasting the people who've made this hobby great, then you need to go and find yourself another video. If you're here to be challenged on that view, and maybe, you want to have a little bit of a discussion, or maybe you agree with me and you want to have your own thoughts maybe put into an essay video format, then this video is probably for you. If you like what I do, the subscribe button is down below. I've drank my tea, I've now got my coffee, so I'm all hyped up and ready to go as I read this script that I took about 4 or 5 hours formatting, because when videos are this challenging, you need to make sure you're getting your points across properly, because this is an issue that I feel quite strongly about. So, let's dive right in, shall we? To our first part that I've called The Lost Boys, because I think that's kind of what we are. Not vampires, of course. I mean, in other ways. So the important thing here is to note is that recently we went through a phenomenon in the hobby with another game called Trench Crusade. Now, if you don't know what happened, essentially a lot of Warhammer 40,000 fans went over to the Trench Crusade game because they didn't feel like Warhammer 40,000 was giving them benefit for their money anymore. So they said, right, we'll go over to Trench Crusade and we'll just go in there, right? Trench Crusade is a very dark, very Catholic, shall we say, game about, really dark things, totalitarian things. 40k on steroids, if 40k wasn't in space, right? That's essentially what we have when we come to Trench Crusade. Now, you can see why a lot of 40k fans thought, oh, that might be right up our alley, so they went over there, only to be found that a lot of them were already getting banned from their Discord and other places to do with Trench Crusade. A lot of people have been telling me, and from what I've seen as well, is that the minute you were saying you were a 40k fan, you were sort of being ushered out of the door, right? So not just the toxic ones among us were getting pasted with this brush, and that is why I've made this video, because I think that's not right, and I think more games are starting to do this. I'm getting reports from a lot of people on emails. In fact, I'm getting so inundated that it's hard to find the Hobby Nightmare sometimes for emails like this, where people have tried to join other games with even a 40k profile picture and been automatically rejected because they're not wanted in there, right? So, the most important thing is not that Trench Crusade, in my opinion, doesn't want 40k people over there. You'd be mad not to want 40k people in your sphere if you're doing a war game, unless you don't like money. No. It's that they don't want the toxic 40k people over there. At least that is the argument I keep hearing, especially from Trench Crusade fans. They're saying, no, we do want 40k people over here, we just don't want the toxic ones. Alright, fair enough. Unfortunately, as normal 40k fans, we are tarred with the same brush as those basement dwellers who make us look like bitter, sexless mouth breathers. And that is on both sides of the political divide, by the way. Do not think I'm having a go at one side over the other. I know how you all think when it comes to that kind of thing. I don't think the issue with Trench Crusade is political, though. I think they took one look at the storm 40k produced with the Fem Stodies issue a few weeks ago and thought, you know what? Nah, we're good. Thanks. Right? I know how they're feeling because I do that myself. I do that myself. When back in the day, like I freely admit, and I will do later on in this script too, in that I'm more conservative than I am liberal. Right? I'm more right leaning than I am left leaning in 70 to 80% of my makeup. Right? So, but when I started to attract certain parts of the alt-right crowd to the channel, I stepped back from doing any political discourse whatsoever. Because that's not what I want, right? I was attracting the wrong kind of attention. I was like, no, this is not what I want on the channel, okay? I don't know how I can say I'm not one of you more plainly, you know, and yet I was still getting it. I was still getting people saying, "No, you tell them, you know, they shouldn't be involved in the hobby," things like that, you know. I just, yeah, I had to take a big step back and say, no more politics. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to talk about that much. I can't, you know. And you probably noticed the last 50 or so hobby nightmares, you know, if politics comes up, I'll talk about it for a minute and then move right along, because it's not the kind of channel that I want to make, you know. So, I'm often told, though, that the more conservative of our fan base are the victims, because they are always the ones targeted. And I think this is because they are the ones who are indeed targeted by Games Workshop, as the law of the company, crafted, naturally speaks, whether they like it or not, to more conservative and based mindsets. It does. You can't look at 40k and not tell me that it's more geared towards people who think in a certain way. I.e., people like me, who are more conservative and old-fashioned than they are liberal and new-fashioned. Do you know what I mean? It just does. And it's so cool that even friends of mine who are way liberal still love 40k, because they pat it on the head and go, "Oh, that's ridiculous." Do you know what I mean? Because it's so cool. And also are, like, you know, quite conservatively aligned, go, "That's really cool." And there are certain parts of the setting that I really do identify with. The other parts of it are terrifying. Don't get me wrong. There are certain parts of it, like you know, relying on yourself, not liking government to be that big and overreaching on you all the time. Themes like that we really like, you know? Now, in the modern world, Games Workshop does not want to associate with those fans. That's very, very, very important. But they were happy to take their money for decades. So those fans head over to find pastures new, only to find that they have been labelled as toxic and problematic. And so no game wants to touch them. Especially in the current market, where most companies have people within them that are very progressive and not aligned with such a fan base in any way. Essentially, we become the lost boys of wargaming, right? We were a part of 40k because we thought it was cool. We liked the grimdark nature of it, right? You know? We like that kind of thing. 40k's not for us anymore? Fine, we'll go find something else. We go and try and find something else, and that's then taken away from us, because people see us as toxic and problematic. This is a perfect storm of nonsense, at least for me. The hardest part is that whilst most of the blame for this undoubtedly lies at Games Workshop's door, no one is completely blameless. Not even me, right? We've all been there. We've all... How do I put this? Any sort of hobby like this, with lore like this, like 40k has, is always going to attract the extremes, right? Always. It's always going to attract the people who want to celebrate certain ideologies that shouldn't be celebrated, that shouldn't be held up as a thing. It's always going to attract those people. You're never going to get away from that. And what I think Games Workshop's trying to do is get away from that. But in doing so, they rip out the heart and soul of Grimdark and what it means to people, and so they go and try and find something else. But this is where we get to the problem, you see. How do they see us? Let's first define who they are. How do they see Warhammer 40,000 as a fan base? Well, in this situation, they would be normies or people from other games in the tabletop space who are not involved in the 40k side of the hobby. If you ask anybody who even has a fathom of what Warhammer 40,000 is, and then ask them what the fan base is like, let's be honest, what do you think they would say? I'm aware this is a sweeping statement, but you can qualify it by simply asking the internet to do so. Do so now, like I did when I was writing this video. They see us as basement-dwelling, far-right-leaning weirdos who get very annoyed whenever somebody who is not white or male or fighting for the rights of those two sets of people dares to show up in our hobby. Well, here is the thing. They're fucking wrong. We gatekeep this hobby to ensure that those who are starting their journey here are doing so because they like Warhammer 40,000 and what it is. In fact, our gatekeeping is in your best interests as somebody who is not yet into 40k but thinking of dipping their toe in, because now you know what you are stepping into and how welcome you would be, regardless of race, gender or religious background, if you like 40k too. That's literally what healthy gatekeeping is. Keeping the hobby as it is for people who like it as it is now and in the future. Unfortunately, this view has been hijacked. Well, how? Games Workshop for the most part. They make announcements like their infamous "you will not be missed" statement from back in 2020. Still, that is still the shot heard around the hobby world, if you ask me. It is still the I said it at the time, right? This is the start of the end. This is it. They've declared war. This is what they've done, right? Which casts us, their own fan base, in a terrible light. Let me ask you another question. If Games Workshop felt that their own fan base was an awesome one worthy of respect, would they have released that statement? Of course they wouldn't have. They did it to jump on the far left bandwagon of the time, nailing their colours to that sinking mast and painting their own fan base as idiotic edgelords. You know what is tragic? They were rewarded for it too, because the pandemic soon occurred and came along, throwing Games Workshop's profits through the roof. Oh, how clever they must have felt seeing those numbers go up after they made such a statement. And oh, how now they must be squirming in seeing those numbers fall back down to normal and even below where they once were, now that we're all leaving the hobby. We already know their response though. They just raised the prices again. So yes, I do have Games Workshop's back when it comes to the correct decisions that they choose to make. I make no bones about that. But in this, their mask slipped. In showing the world what they think of their own fan base, they declared open season on the ridicule and abandonment of the Warhammer 40,000 fan base. This is how the world sees us, as the subject of hobby nightmares. And those are the more mild examples of what they think of us. Okay? So that's what I think is going on here. Yes, we do have negative actors in our space, like every hobby does. Every hobby has weirdos in it, right? Every single hobby has one. Or a few. Or hundreds or thousands, right? But at the same time, I honestly think that we're tarred with a brush because our setting is so grimdark and extreme that I honestly think that a lot of us are looked at as these edgelords, as these weirdos who shouldn't be allowed anywhere near anybody else's games. And that is a total crock of shit. It simply is. It's a crock of shit. Alright? Why? Because hobby nightmares are not the norm. I should know. I say this all the time, but they really are not the norm. Hobby Nightmares as a series of videos only works because the stories we are sent in stand out from the normal hobby experience so starkly. If there was a Dave or a that guy in every single hobby group, if there was a weirdo in every factor of the hobby, then Hobby Nightmares wouldn't exist. At least not in its current state. In other words, the Hobby Nightmares series on this channel should elicit shock, outrage, laughter, cringe, and more laughter. If it doesn't do that, right, then it doesn't work, right? And it can't do that if Hobby Nightmares are normal. And they're not. They're absolutely abnormal. This is why I finally got around to making this video, as I feel uniquely qualified to make a judgment on the 40k fandom for myself, and maybe some of you will find that interesting. Why? Well, I have read the stories of so many of you. We are talking thousands now of you. I have worked in the hobby twice, once in a short stint working for Games Workshop, and another running a local hobby store for much longer than that. I've been in and around the hobby for 2 decades. I have more exposure and evidence on our local hobby area, on the world hobby area, than most others can attest to, that I can back that up by what I'm saying, right? Only yesterday, we had, a Hobby Nightmare submission from Southeast Asia, right? We've had them from all over the place. There's not a part of this world that I've not spoken to somebody who's involved in the hobby there and gauge what it's like to be there and be in the hobby. From this channel, from watching this channel, you can see that maybe as a person, I'm uniquely qualified to make a judgment on whether the Warhammer 40,000 hobby base is actually toxic or not. So what am I saying? Well, the Warhammer 40,000 fandom is not toxic. I repeat it, it's not toxic. Not in the slightest. It has problematic people in it, in the minority, who have some growing up to do. Fair enough. Fair cop there. That is no different in essence to any other fandom out there in the nerd sphere. From Star Trek to Star Wars, Dune to Lord of the Rings, My Little Pony, cringe, to Berserk. Everything in nerddom has some sort of seedy underbelly to it. Listen, I know back in the day, a lot of the old greybeards will remember this. Think about how innocent Lord of the Rings is seen these days, how quaint it's seen as. Especially the movie trilogy, right? How quaint those books are seen as. Good old-fashioned yarns, Yeah, well back in the day, people thought that they were devil-worshipping books. People thought that if you were into Lord of the Rings, you were some sort of sadist, or you were some sort of weirdo who wrote things on subway walls. Yeah, and look how innocent Lord of the Rings actually is. Listen, there are seedy underbellies to everything in nerddom because it attracts broken people, and there's nothing wrong with that. I totally believe that that is one of the reasons why nerddom even exists, is to give the broken, the left behind, the intellectually overstimulated, right? It's give those people somewhere to exist and express themselves. And in doing so, they create absolute works of art. Do you really think Kentaro Miura would have written Berserk if he didn't have other nerds around him to actually pull him in and make sure that he could do what he wanted to do? Nerddom gave him a place to express himself. It gave him a place to draw and write stories that bring grown men to fucking tears. He couldn't do that anywhere else. Okay? The difference is, most fandoms that I've spoken about here are not thrown under the bus by those who make their product and lore like Games Workshop did with theirs. Maybe Star Wars, but They put us on the altar of inclusion and diversity and sacrificed us. They served us up and tried to delete us from the hobby to the point that other games like Trench Crusade don't want to touch us on the base chance that we were big 40k fans in the past. That is the smear job of Games Workshop, and that is a sad state of affairs. And here's one more thing. Every single time a company does it, they tank. Star Wars are way into that right now, right? They started their journey on doing this in 2014, 2015, right? Hating the fans, hating everything to do with them, right? They started that journey then. They are 10 years into it, and their brand is fucking tanking. Absolutely tanking. Games Workshop have always been sort of, anti-fan. They've always been like against us in a certain way. But we've gotten so used to that it took until about 2019, 2020 when they actually came out and told us they didn't like us. That's when their process started, right? So we're only 4 years in to Games Workshop and their process. In another 6 years, they'll be in the same group as Star Wars, only without the massive financial backing of a Disney to pull them out of the fucking sewer. And that is a sad state of affairs. They sacrificed us on the altar of inclusivity and appearing to do the right thing. But they didn't do the right thing. Because all of us knew how disingenuous it was when they started pandering to what was going on in 2020. We all knew how disingenuous it was. We all knew it wasn't real. Okay? They sacrificed us on there. They said, look at our fan base. Look how toxic it is. And look how we're telling them all to fuck off. Well, you tell people to go away. What a miracle when they do. And do not get me wrong. I am fully aware that there are bad actors involved in moves like they attempt to head over to Trench Crusade. I do. I'm fully aware that some 40k fans are so warped in their ideology, in wanting to be far right and wanting to be, hateful of women and anyone who's not like them, that they went to Trench Crusade thinking that that's the kind of game they were getting into a Trench Crusade. I'm not saying that didn't occur. Of course it did, because there are people like that in every single fandom out there. There are people like that. What I'm saying is, 40k fans are tarred with the brush that Games Workshop gave to everybody. Because Games Workshop wants everybody to think that 40k fans, at least the old guard 40k fans, who like the grimdark nature of it, are all like those people. Far-right leaning, alt-right, in the basement, mouth-breathing, sexless morons. That's what they want the world to think of us. And that's why we can't have nice things. I'm serious. It started then. So don't get me wrong. I'm fully aware that there are bad actors involved in moves like the attempt to head over to Trench Crusade. I get it, right? There are certain factors of any fan base, and 40k is no exception, that have ulterior motives of going over to Trench Crusade, and maybe they saw something in Trench Crusade that Trench Crusade said, listen guys, we're satire, don't be coming over here with that bullshit. I'm all for that, Trench Crusade, I agree, right? Cool. Not all, or even the majority, but hey, they are there. It's just people never want to admit that it's easier to just label somebody as toxic, or far-right, or woke, and move on. This is what I mean when I say that both right and left, at least the extreme portions of those things, do nothing but add to the negative reputation of our hobby. They are the two shoulders of fucking idiocy. Both use the tactic of taking somebody's humanity away, right? That's why you're called woke. That's why you're called a bigot, right? Because if they try to examine your arguments and your opinions, that means they have to open up their minds and engage with them, and they don't want to do that, right? If you ask people not to be intolerant wankers, or if you simply enforce rules that are meant to stop you from being said wanker, you're woke, right? If you want to keep 40k as it is, and rightfully gatekeep a hobby that seems like is constantly under siege, you're some sort of alt-right bigot. This is the level of idiocy we are dealing with here, and once you are tarnished with one side or the other, that stink is extremely difficult to wash off. What I am saying is that such people are not the norm in this hobby. The vast majority of people in the hobby, like myself, just feel like Warhammer 40,000 and the people who make it no longer represent us or have any interest in entertaining us for our own money or even in treating us fairly on a day-to-day basis. As such, we are looking for new games to get into, new people to give our money to, new friends to make and things to try. If you were smart, Trench Crusade, you'd accept those people with open arms and laugh all the way to the bank. So there's one thing that I will tell you about normal 40k fans who have jobs, who have money, who want to be able to spend time with their friends, geeking out over their models, it's that they will pay you a lot of money for the privilege. If you don't want to make money, then carry on doing exactly what you're doing now. So, I've told the big companies what to do, because, they're obviously going to listen to me, some douchebag on the internet who, can't figure out what socks he's wearing in the morning, but, So I've told them what to do, on my high horse. What can you do? The person listening to this video, who's either sitting there seething on the train going, this guy doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about, or you're sitting there nodding along sagely, because obviously you're a man of culture. What can you do as somebody who is in the hobby and doing what you want to do inside of it? You're looking around at the state of the hobby now thinking, well, shit, what the fuck do I do now? 40k doesn't want me. Trench Crusade doesn't want me. None of these games want me because I'm a 40k fan. I don't feel seen, or that I should be somewhere, or I can find friends to go and chill out and relax with, you know what I mean? I don't know where to go. So what can you do? Well, I have said it many times before, but my main focus of advice that when it comes to being involved with our hobby is to take charge of your own hobby time and space. Alright? It is precious, so treat it that way. It's the golden rule of this channel. Your hobby time is precious. If you're not enjoying it, something's deeply wrong and you need to examine it. If there is no space available that gives you the same buzz that Warhammer 40,000 used to, then perhaps think about creating it for yourself. That could mean using Warhammer 40,000 as a base and getting your friends together and knowing what you like about Warhammer 40k and sticking to those things and gatekeeping it ferociously, right? That might mean that. It might mean that you have friends who love the grimdark nature of 40k, you get them together on a Saturday for beer and pretzels and wargaming, and that's what you do in the hobby. It might mean that you do that. And you cut everybody else out. I've told people to do that before, right? Be accepting of other people who want to do what you like, right? But if they don't, then say, that's fair enough, off you go, you do your own thing elsewhere. Not a problem, dude. You know, that's all good. You know? I will freely admit that in many of my political outlooks, I am more right-leaning and conservative than left-leaning and liberal. Whenever I come across companies trying to force themselves to fit the modern liberal mould, I tend to just naturally walk away from that. Not through hate, but through just being tired. I have a real sense that you are allowed to criticise right-leaning ways of thinking, and when a setting critiques and examines its cultures and inspirations, that makes for a much more engaging setting and game. We are not really allowed to critique left-leaning ideologies in the same way without being labelled as alt-right or problematic in some way. This is why, in my opinion, the most interesting settings tend to have very conservative governments at the top of them. Hear me out. Warhammer 40,000 is one, the entire genre of cyberpunk is another. Almost any gritty and interesting fantasy setting will have a more feudal and conservative outlook laid over the top of it. The thing is, these spaces do not lend themselves to the modern paradigm of inclusivity at all costs, and if we are going to make progress, then we are going to have to accept that and make our own spaces. If you're finding nothing like Warhammer 40,000 out there, or if you find the behaviour of Trench Crusade and other games appalling, then make your own. Get your head down and start working through the bones of a 40k-like setting for people to play and get engrossed in. And if you can't do that, then look to others who are perhaps trying to do so, and nurture them as they do so, either by helpful critique, general support, or even by getting your wallet out and backing their game on Kickstarter or whatever they are, or wherever they are funding it, right? If Warhammer 40,000 wants to walk away from us, I say, let it. We have the talent and drive to make great things that can make people think. Things like Warhammer 40,000 used to be, that are defined by their core tenets, that anybody of any creed or colour can be involved in it and find themselves in it without things devolving into a political mess. Escapism is key. If a setting fails to do that, then, in my opinion, it has failed as a setting and as a game. Warhammer 40,000 is rapidly losing its ability to provide escapism for the fan base it cultivated all those years ago. I'm putting my money where my mouth is too. I'm addressing the problem myself. I am creating right now a setting inspired by Dune, Warhammer 40,000, and the early feudalism of Conan and the Hyborian Age. Essentially, imagine Caliban from Warhammer 40,000 and add warped and hateful machines that want to destroy the Knights of Humanity and wipe away human civilization. And out there in the wastes between kingdoms are pieces of long-lost technology from our golden age, winking at us like sirens in the dark, wanting us to join with them. This is the kind of setting I am creating because I can't find it out there anymore, especially in 40k. It's grimdark, and those who like 40k can find themselves in it. If you're looking for a way to express yourself as 40k loses what made it 40k to start with, look to one of these projects and back it, or even start your own. There will come a time when we have to build this house on our own, and that's fine by me. 40k was getting too cramped anyway. I made a similar remark at the end of the Fem Studies video, and I think it still holds true, right? Lads, if they don't want us here, walk away. Fuck them. Build their own place with blackjack and hookers. Do you know what I mean? If they don't want us here, fine. Fuck them. Let's go. Let's do our own thing. Let's do our own thing. Create something cool, magical, awesome. Take inspiration from the things that you like. Create something for your friends, even. If you're a DM out there, you've literally already got the skills. Create a world for you and your friends to adventure in, to have fun in, to relax in, to explore the themes you want to explore. That's what you should do, right? It doesn't mean express your intolerances or anything like that, you know? Again, we are far on the other side of that as 40k fans. Most of us absolutely want to play Warhammer games, grimdark setting games with people from all around the world. It doesn't matter what creed or colour you are. It doesn't matter what culture you're from. I don't care. If you like 40k, you've got a brother in me. And we're going to get along. Do you know what I mean? There's a very good chance we're going to get along. That's where I am with it, okay? But I do think Games Workshop and the hobby at large has done a terrific job in alienating us and presenting us to the wider gaming public as these toxic people that they don't want around. So in a weird way, I can't really fault Trench Crusade and companies like that from saying, do you know what? That 40k stuff, those fans, we don't really want them over here. I don't blame them, but I think they're making a mistake. I think they've drank the Games Workshop Kool-Aid. I think they've literally heard what Games Workshop has to say about their own fan base and thought, you know what, we don't want that over here. And I can't blame them. If they believe Games Workshop and what Games Workshop thinks of us, then I can't blame them for wanting us to stay away. I can't blame them for that. I can't. Okay? There have been certain times even on my own Discord when I've had that feeling of, oh my god, you know what I mean? Can we just stop being toxic to each other? But the thing is, that ain't the norm. And what they're doing is, they're leaving hundreds of thousands, perhaps millions of pounds of good money on the table by walking away from the 40k crowd and saying, they're all toxic, we don't want them here. That's wrong. That's bullshit. Because 40k as a hobby is full of people who are not toxic. We love grimdark, far future, fantasy role-playing and wargaming. That's what we're here for. And if you're here for that too, then you're one of us, and we like you, and we want to play games with you. Right? Please don't judge us on the minority who try and pull us all down with their fucking political idiocy. And please, also, on the other side of that spectrum, don't buy into what Games Workshop wants to say about their own fan base. Because any company that tries to besmirch their own fan base in the way that Games Workshop do to us is not worth listening to. Alright? Cool. I'll be back tomorrow with some more Hobby Nightmares. I love you all a long time. Have a wonderful rest of your day. And I'll see you then, alright? Have a good one. Bye now.